Heights Planning Commission, Wednesday, April 19th, 2023. Roll call, please.
Commissioner Von Zerno,
Here.
Commissioner Kaskowski. Here. Commissioner Wark,
Here.
Commissioner Hollers excused, Chairman Gentry,
Here.
Mayor Kearns. Here. Councilman Panzera,
Here.
Director Mazzara,
Here.
Director Coker,
Here.
and City Attorney Kazim. Here.
All right, so no minutes to approve this evening, so roll right into the administration of the oath. Can anyone who's going to or think they may speak, please stand, raise your right hand, and answer in the affirmative. I swear to tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth. All right, thank you. Any other changes to the agenda?
No changes.
All right, let's get to it. First case of the night is PC case number 6-2023. I will need to recuse myself in this case, so Chairwoman, Vice Chair will take over.
So if anyone's going to present, this is the time to do it, so go ahead.
Good evening, everyone. How are you?
Good, thank you.
Do we have a staff report first, or do I get to go first?
You go first and then.
All right. My name's Dimitri. I'm an attorney for SDJ Holdings. I'm also the owner of this bar. So I'm wearing two hats today. Starting last summer, when Cleaver went out of business, we decided to take over the bar at 1099 West First across from Pierce. I've lived on that street for 20 years and sort of been something I've been trying to do for a long time with that particular space, because our idea was to try to bring the park and the business center together, sort of more in, like to be congruous more than it was. When the old Bag of Nails pub went out in 2018, Harvest Pizza took over, and they really kept the same footprint for the most part. And between the time that the Bag of Nails went downhill, and I've lived there since 2003, so I saw it all. Harvest took over the old spot, and then Cleaver, they let the patio that's on the front of my space now go down to the point where it was not really something that I was going to be able to keep, particularly because of the slants, the water penetration, things like that. The shrubs were a hot mess, and so really what we wanted to do in order to bring the park in was to get rid of it and go completely separate and new. What we ended up doing, because it made more sense from a construction standpoint and from the park standpoint, was to just put concrete straight on top of it. And by doing that, we were able to elevate the entire patio, and the response that we've gotten is that it allows people to interact with the park when their kids are there. And because we're a family-friendly place, and because we want to be projecting out, we have been able, with that elevated patio, to have people come in and really look at us and say, man, we feel like we're at the park with our kids, which was really the goal. We have some big grandiose plans down the road to try to hopefully put some indoor-outdoor in as well with windows, but cost was an issue there. In order to bring the park in more, what we'd like to do, and because of this meeting tonight, we sort of stopped after the patio was poured, is that we'd like to put a railing around the perimeter of the patio, and then probably put something on top of it, akin to like a deck or like a bar top, like about this big, to allow, sort of like what Rick has at La Tavola, to try to let people see out from the patio or sit in, it doesn't matter, but we'd really like to try to bring more people in with that aesthetic. We have the similar setup inside the bar. We have stadium seating, and that stadium seating is the same thing. It's kind of bar top with an aesthetic that lets people sit and kind of project out, and we really want to bring that park in. So we really didn't change the footprint of anything. We poured concrete over what was already existing. We poured it all the way to the sidewalk. At the time that we did that, there was a perimeter that had bushes. Those bushes were unkempt and they couldn't really be saved. We took the bushes out and we just put concrete straight on top of it. But we didn't expand the patio more than what the space is. We also didn't change the parameters of the variance that was given back in 2003. We didn't change the parking, we didn't enlarge the parking, we didn't subtract from the parking. Based a lot on Stephen DeTore, the salon behind us, we elected to stripe the back parking lot. It also helped us get an ADA space, which we needed because we ended up putting steps in the front because we wanted that elevated patio. So the stripes in the back never existed. And what we found in the 5 months that we were doing stuff in there was that people were just parking this way and that way. Trucks were coming in and going catty corner, and the people that were trying to come in, the patrons and also the employees in the back of the center, were having a horrible time getting in and out. And so by striping it, doing something that didn't exist, the trucks now are in the alley and they kind of stay out of the spaces and people park uniformly, and we're really getting probably double the amount of cars in that back that we get. And we also have had a really good response with using the accessible route in the back. And so what we're asking for today apparently is major site plan review because we changed the patio and elevated it, and also because there was a ramp in the front previously and now there's an accessible path in the back. So that's what I have right now. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Maybe we'll hold our questions a little bit, and if you want to give your report.
Yep,
Liz.
sure. So if you want to just follow along, Megan, I included some pictures on the second page of the existing prior conditions, kind of the extent of this particular building. The old Marshall's building is a separate building, and you're going to hear a case about that coming up here in a minute as well, so just make that note. You can see what applicant was talking about with the lot in the back not being striped in those, in some of those photos. And then there's some imagery there. Google hasn't caught up with the changes, so there were still some pictures of what the patio looked like previously with the shrubs in between the brick piers and the wrought iron fence that was out there previously. In terms of just kind of following along with those additional pictures as you run through there of the prior parking lot, you can also see the striping that was done, showing the ADA space that was added. Let's see, I think there were really two issues why we have folks in today. One is because this was a prior planning commission case that was ruled on. There's changes to it. It's prohibited by the code to make changes after a ruling, so there's a new situation we need to bring them back. And also just on the basis of the changes themselves, even if there hadn't been a prior case. There's a few things to point out. When the prior case was heard in 2004, that was when the patio was created. To create room for the patio to exist, the parking got pushed out and overlaps the right of way now instead of being fully on private property. So that was kind of what happened in 2004. There was the prior fence that was there and a gate that led from the parking space out front to an entry from the front. A couple other things that were noted in the Planning Commission minutes, which are attached, are just the relationship between the patio and the landscaping and the fence, and then also hours of operation. Changes, obviously the patio has been expanded somewhat, as was mentioned, out to the kind of limit of where the landscaping was previously. It was raised up, so I know that there's a concern the building director has with the relationship between the new patio and the existing wall of the building needing to be waterproof, and I think they're going to follow up about that. Obviously the fence was removed and the landscaping was removed, and there's a different relationship now with ADA parking accessible from the back. So on the just general basis of the major site plan review, all projects that have any changes that are in these zoning districts that have any changes listed have to come in for planning commission review the way the code is written right now. So as I mentioned, that's the other reason. I'm going to take the topics kind of in succession. One is parking. The existing lot wasn't striped. It's certainly an improvement to have it striped and to control traffic in that way. this site slopes a little bit, so all the doors and the parking lot and the walkways and everything, they don't line up really perfectly every time, so different doors have to make different accommodations to access the various businesses. The additional ADA space in the back, based on historical aerial photos, would indicate that there used to be 5 smaller spaces, now there's 4 correctly sized spaces along that one run. While there wasn't identified parking before, so you can't really know how many people could park back there. I looked at the auditor's site for the whole building and did a calculation for what parking would be required, so you guys would just know that. In terms of the size of the building, at 250 square feet per space for restaurant and retail, there would be 45 required, there's 34 provided, just as a data point. The spaces are a little smaller, but they're within workable dimensions, and they maximize the amount of parking that can be accommodated on the site. So we don't have any issue with the changes in parking. It makes good sense for the business and for the retail center at large, and we support that. With the patio, ultimately you'll hear that we're asking you to make a determination on it because it was a prior planning commission case. So the next section is just really going over some of the considerations for that. The code generally expresses a preference for front yards to not be devoted only to parking and other hardscape, but to include softscape. It also recognizes that there's a lot of cases where that's just not practically possible. The guidelines, the design guidelines call out a few things worth noting. Protection of tree canopies, relationship between parking and landscaping is kind of a well-identified thing where you've got parking, landscaping is desirable, particularly shade trees. The raising of the patio does good things for ADA accessibility in that you can get in the building from the back and then you can get out onto the patio, also on level with the interior of the restaurant, for ADA accessibility that way. So that is a help compared to the step that used to be there. With regard to landscaping, I think the code and the design guidelines would support softening in some fashion, whether that's with this particular location or that business is owned, as I understand it, by their partnership with this business and one of those owners that owns the whole facility. Maybe there's some other landscaping that could be replaced someplace else to kind of replace that softening in this location, or the commission can make a determination in that regard. The tree that's there, appreciate the desire to keep it, and I think we all feel that way. The surcharge from the patio weight across the entire root zone is liable to be harmful to it. So it might want to have some support, or you might want to stipulate that if it dies, that it would be replaced. And then there's other little details. The plans that were submitted call out for the fence to be of an equal height, but because the patio steps, the fence will step, and it might want to be just lined up. Also, the piers are a consistent height, and that fence might be above the piers on the one side and below the top of the piers on the other side. So there's just a little bit of design detail that might want to be worked out there. And we haven't heard about the seating. I don't know if that was intended to be integrated along the edge. Maybe that would be a way to resolve those changes in elevation. And then just the remediation with regard to the patio up against the existing facade. Design guidelines articulate a desire to maintain those historic facades, and so there's a waterproofing that would facilitate that. So again, in terms of recommendations, we recommend approval on the parking, including variances on the sizes and aisle widths and everything, the number, which would cover the whole retail center, by the way, as a matter of record, which I know we've been trying to do, is to get some of those variances that exist, in fact, just recognized by the governing bodies. And then with regard to the patio, really we kind of leave it up to the commission, since it's a change from something previously approved. If you would choose to approve it as it is presented. There is just one variance that you would want to include in the motion, which would be variance for the extent of development into the front yard, which is a little further now than what was presented and permitted previously. And that's it.
You may extend of development into the walk.
It's not into the walk, but the patio extends a couple feet compared to where it was before.
So next-
It didn't extend into the depth of the
Yeah, I
piers.
didn't know that, but I didn't know
The walkway is still
what makes it a
there.
variance, I guess. I want to make it
It
clear.
actually,
The fact that
legally, it
there's-
would change the existing variance because
The
the
fact that
existing
there's-
variance was built upon.
The fact that there's a additional construction in the front yard. It would be like somebody extending their porch further in the
Right.
front yard. So,
Have questions?
Yeah, a couple. So obviously this is constructed, and that's probably the biggest point. We have rules and processes for a reason. You guys are definitely familiar with those processes, with the drawings, you say like fix, and so your solution was different. And so just walk me through how we got to where we're at today, because I think it does matter. It makes it hard for us in this position to actually rule. And I don't want to set the precedent that you can just do what you want. So I'm going to start there, and then I may have some questions about like design details that were mentioned, et cetera.
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, legally, and with all due respect, we absolutely disagree with the administration about whether or not this was any change.
Okay.
We poured concrete on top of existing concrete. We did it on our plot, and with all due respect to the city, legally, when a variance is given, it changes the scope of parking from where the line is to where the line is. So analogizing to your front yard just doesn't make any sense, because the line was drawn at the edge of those blocks that are there after the shrubs that were there. So we didn't expand anything, one. Two, what we thought we were doing was literally just pouring concrete on top of something. I don't believe, as I stand here today under oath, that that requires a permit or anything else. It's like for like, and it is what it is. So the fact that we're here today, legally, we respectfully disagree with. With that said, if the board here would tell us that we need to change something, we're absolutely here to participate in the process. And really what you're telling us today is that we have to incur additional cost. And so it's a matter of cost. And we're more than happy to incur the cost if that's what you feel we should do and we agree with it. At the end of the day, we believe wholeheartedly that our significant investment into this place really, really benefits the neighborhood, the community, and everybody here in this room. And we've both been over 20-year residents of Grandview. We don't want to do anything that would ever be negative to Grandview. As soon as we were told that they thought that we needed a permit, we stopped. We made changes to the steps to comply with the building code. We made changes inside. We got inspected and permitted. So we certainly, we had an architect look at this. We looked at this. We didn't think that we needed a permit for what we were doing. Quite frankly, we still don't, but that's okay.
If I can speak to the board, from a building code standpoint, it definitely would need a permit, especially when you're adding steps, which then kicks in risers, treads, graspable handrails. So even though it's elevated concrete, it still would have needed a permit from us. After he did it, we did post a stop work order. And at the time, they had a ramp that was too steep. It did not meet the building code. So Dimitri suggested that he was going to do steps, and I said that you can do steps, but it's at your own risk, because first of all, it wasn't permitted, didn't have planning commission approval. So the steps that he altered were at his own risk, because he wanted to get open. So we allowed him to occupy the space only with the condition that whatever happens at the planning commission meeting, he has to make changes if required. So.
I guess from my perspective, reviewing the existing to the new, definitely changes to the site regardless of the building code issue. I see, you know, the accessible path route from the rear not actually going to an accessible path of like city routes and sidewalks. I find that making the space less accessible, noting, of course, that we did not have a ramp in the front, so in some ways it is a little bit more accessible inside the space. Although I'm looking, and I think there's elevation changes in the space. So like, at that, the whole thing, this was potentially an opportunity for us to address some accessibility concerns on the front and get us to the sidewalk. And as we reviewed today, it's after the fact, and we maybe could have worked and suggested together how to address that. And now we can't, or we can, and as you say, incur cost to you and damage maybe the damage maybe your business. But at the same point, we also, sit here and we have that opportunity to do that, I guess, but I don't disagree that it's not an improvement to the previous conditions. So like, now I have to weigh the two concerns when I probably would have rightfully had an opportunity to weigh in ahead of time, which is part of our charge as a commission. So that's my immediate concern.
Could I address the accessibility thing real
Yeah,
fast?
please do.
Okay.
Please do.
Because so these were 2 spaces originally that were built a long time ago. And inside, so from, it's hard, I got the best pictures I could figure out, but
Sure.
from this space to this space, there's about a foot elevation change inside. What had happened was this all went down. And so what we were left with was we could take all of it out, potentially, and lower everything, but we would be stuck with a significant slope. And the slope for accessibility would have been extremely cumbersome. Had we tried to put tables and chairs outside of that slope, I mean, it could have been done, but very difficult. In addition to that, if you look at the other businesses behind next to us, none of them are actually accessible from the front. They're all inaccessible according to ADA guidelines for one reason or another. So what they all do is, in the ordinary course of their business, use the back. And so what we did was create a flat, level space where a van accessible spot where somebody can park, come into the back, and then you can get either to this side or this side flat by going through the inside. And so while I agree you can't park where you were right here and go up a ramp and try to get in, that actually would have given you access to less. And because you couldn't access the patio from there except through the gate, and the gate's not accessible. So you now have access to the entire patio, and you have a much more accessible path than what you had because it wasn't accessible as it was built. So I guess what I can't really address going back in time.
Sure.
I don't have that ability. But what I can say is we absolutely made it more accessible as it was and as it is. And had we done nothing and not come before you and not spent thousands and thousands of dollars to make it better, I suppose we all would have been worse off. But at the same time, today, we stand here in a way that it's a lot better. So,
I guess my concern though is, I love that you're addressing, car accessibility. Pedestrian accessibility from someone that comes down first or is dropped off on a bus is completely different. So while I agree to some components, I disagree to others. I don't think we're going to solve that today, and I don't think that I'm in the position, or at least my opinion to this commission is I don't think we need to cut out a large chunk of their patio to add a ramp out front. So at that point, it could have been a discussion before it was done, and I think it was a worthy discussion. And that's the point I want to make there. And the second component that I have is I would like to see this softened up a little bit on the front. I know that you're planning some sort of black gate. There aren't a lot of details for me to even review or consider what is proposed. If you have those, I'd love to see those. On my end, I think even just planter boxes or something could solve this, or they maybe overhang the sidewalk a little bit as long as they don't encroach passing, or maybe they're in the interior and they're worked into your ledge. I would love to see some of that, and I would like, and I understand seeing some of your patio seating, like you're maximizing your patio, and that is partly why the patio is designed the way it is. So I think I'm just curious on that interface, and particularly as you introduce new layers. And so I don't know if you have thoughts on that, or if you've worked through design.
so one of the big things that we've gotten through being open for, 6 weeks is that there's a lot of feedback that being able to see through is a huge, huge, huge difference between what was there and what is there. We were extremely, extremely unkempt before, and these bushes were just out of control and crazy. We are fine with softening. I don't have a plan yet, other than to tell you, I wish I had a picture of the stadium inside, but basically, I'm not sure that we could overhang just because I'm not sure how much width there is on the sidewalk, because it is right up to it, so I'd be a little bit nervous about that. Even if we came in a little bit and did it, I would be really, really nervous about obstructing people's view because we have an entire park in front of us. So we are soft. We are as soft as you get. There's a park in front of us. And we want to collaborate with the park, and really that's a bigger desire both for the residents of Grandview and for us as business people than putting some flowers out there.
Dimitri, point of order, do you have copies of the exhibits that you pointed to for the record, or for at least to provide to the clerk?
I've not introduced any exhibits. I have a
You
demonstrative
point-
item that I did not
understand.
introduce.
You pointed to things that will not appear visually in the record.
If you guys would like to keep this, you're welcome to.
Okay. You can take a screenshot of it or something. That's it.
I guess my comment's still the same. I don't think you need to cut back your patio. I don't have a problem with it extending to the extent of the pier and public right of way. I think that there are ways and heights that you can manage that would make it so that we don't just see a metal fence and still accomplish your goals while you're seating. Like even if I'm seating and the planter or thing is built into the fence and clipped on, it interfaces maybe with your table or something along that line.
Yeah, I mean, we'd be happy to look into that. I just haven't done it.
Okay.
So, I mean, we have no problem. Like, if there's a way to incorporate, like, we have lights that we put, they're new lights now, like, they were there, but now they work, and they really brighten it up at night, and they open it up. And, I mean, particularly on the sides, we have no problem with planter boxes on the sides, and really going hard at the sides, and then maybe putting in some strategic plans on the front to bring it together. I just don't want to commit to it right now, because I haven't looked at it. We could totally look into it. I mean, I think planter boxes on the sides actually make decent sense because there really isn't a view obstruction on the sides. And since we only have a chain there right now, we can kind of do whatever.
And then for the tree, my personal opinion is this thing's gonna die. It's probably gonna die. Yeah, while it'd be nice to have an element there, I don't know that I'm the expert to control or impact what it should be. It ends up just getting infilled, I don't have a strong opinion, so it's just for you guys to consider. I think it's you, but the other thing I have is if we're gonna make modifications to the backside, which I agree are better, so just the striping and ADA, the path, some things that I don't know that exist that may be useful or may impact accessibility or travel, maybe a bollard or something to protect.
I'm sorry, what?
A bollard or something right when you come out the door so that you don't get damaged. And then this seems like the right opportunity to understand the trash situation, if I may. Like, I don't know, it's in the rear of the screen, they're all like that, but it's kind of an eyesore across the city. And I hate totally enclosing dumpsters because it causes issues for trash pickup, which could make the operation worse. It seems like a perfect opportunity to maybe put some sort of fence to shield and define that area so they don't shift around your lot. So that's just
Yeah, I mean, I don't own the site.
Sure.
The owner of the site isn't here, so I couldn't commit to changing their site because my site is just what I have.
Sure, but I guess if I'm gonna approve, a major site plan review, that may be a condition. And so if we can't do it today, then it may be something that you would have to come back to the table for. I don't know that I feel that's strong, but.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing is, like, I was there today when the dumpsters came, the guy that takes the dumpsters, and I don't know enough about dumpsters. He came in from the alley, and he came in from the side, and the car's parked this way, so he's coming from the side.
Mhm.
Typically, when you fence a dumpster, you fence it around 3 sides, and then you open gates. Whether you roll them this way or you open them out. In this particular situation, you couldn't do that because of the way he accesses it from the ply, from this side. So it's possible that you could create a door that would come into the parking area.
I'm not suggesting that there needs to be a door at all. I'm suggesting that there's just some sort of permanent screen of sorts, two sides. One
To the back?
Yeah, just from your parking lot to, like, I don't think, I'm less worried about the alley being screened, right? I'm more worried about just like defining the place that this dumpster stays. I just don't want it to move around, it's already tight, it looks ugly, maybe.
Yeah, there are two, just so we're clear.
Looking at it.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know enough about dumpsters to be able to say, I'll do that.
Sure.
I can't do that. I don't have the ability to tell somebody what to do with their real estate. We don't own it. So it would be very, I mean, I'm happy to commit to go to the owner and say, they want you to screen this, but I can't do what I can't do, it's not on my spot.
Just worth a conversation.
Yeah, absolutely, happy to
This
do
is my
it.
opportunity to have, thoughts out there in this realm, and then I can decide how I want to, and this
Got it.
commission can decide how they want to.
Absolutely.
That's all I have in general. I can see some nice things. I think, it's definitely an improvement. I'm glad to see a successful business. I think the interior and the investment's great for our community. I think everything about having, people that live here and own businesses is a great thing. And so in that sense, I think, although you went about it maybe in the way I would have done differently, I think the outcome is still very successful. So.
This is my third business here, by the way, and I permitted the other two, just so we're clear. So it's not like a precedent.
All right, fair enough. So that's it. Sorry, see you guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, I agree with Tim on the process piece. I'm not gonna, he covered it well, I'm not gonna go there, but, a couple of my comments are, I appreciate your desire to connect to the park. Honestly, raising it up a foot, you're still gonna look at those cars, I think, that are parked right there, so like, I think it'd be beneficial to you. Now, maybe if you have a standing bar thing like the Pablo, people can stand up and see, but I think if I were sitting on a patio, I would rather have some green around me that's right there rather than looking at the cars. So if you can figure out a way on the sides or do something strategic, I do not think you should be encroaching, maybe you can anyway, onto the walkways.
We can
already
definitely
tight.
commit to the sides.
Yeah,
That's no
but-
big deal. I'm not sure about the viewpoint on the front, but on the sides, I don't have a problem with that.
But like the front is already tight to this, I mean, we gotta keep
Yeah.
the sidewalk, it's narrow there anyway, but anyway, I think you should think about that. The pier to fence thing that you had mentioned, like, I really think that the stepping of the overall, the fence line should be consistent and not be
Yeah, our
above the-
intention was to go, again, the pictures here. That brick right there,
Yeah.
we want it to be even all the way around it. We don't want it to step up and down.
Okay.
So our intention is to, this step is up about a foot lower than the one on the other side.
Yeah.
So this rail will be a foot higher on the ground to get to even all the way around.
Yeah, so top line, but.
That's our intention,
The thing you
yeah.
see, your eye picks up is kind of.
One
yeah,
uniform,
okay,
yep,
And it won't be
absolutely.
above the pier.
Correct.
And then do you have a cut sheet of what that black rail looks like, or do we see that, or we show that to somebody?
I have a picture on my phone, but no, I don't. I can present one later. So we're gonna do the same, our intention is to do the same rail that's inside. And so it's the interior, but we haven't fabricated it yet because we were told not to do anything. So we didn't want to do anything, so we didn't.
Yep.
So I'm gonna approach for a second here. That's our stadium. And that's the rail.
Okay.
The bar, there would be a bar that would go higher up so that you wouldn't allow anybody to get through it.
Yeah.
We wouldn't want somebody to trip in or trip out. So we would have, but it would be, so that would basically be that bar right there with a foot rail that would be higher to the top so that you can't get in with a top
Some
like
sort
that.
of top, I
Yeah.
see. Okay, but
You
it
guys
had
wanna see?
more, verticals, right, 'cause you gotta do a 4-inch
Exactly.
spacing or whatever.
Exactly. There'd be more verticals.
Yeah.
And I mean, we haven't figured out the dimensions of it
Yeah.
yet. I think I need an architect to do that,
Yeah.
or somebody that's better than me, but.
Okay. Okay. So does that have to get, I'm sorry, does that have to get, does he have to provide a cut sheet of that once they provide, to get permitted before, I mean, that's.
We can recommend that, I would go that
Yeah.
route.
Okay, that's
Put
what,
conditions
yeah,
in.
okay, I would recommend we see that. As far as the tree goes, I do really like the tree, I think it's unique for that patio in that area, so I would like to see the tree kept if possible. I know that it might die, but I would like to see some, whatever, if you can get somebody to look at from the city or to assess if you can do something to help promote it, support it, or whatever it needs to try to keep it. And if it does die, I would recommend, I know you're not gonna get that much mature of a tree, but try to replace something or do something in there, because I think that really does make that space kind of unique, and especially when it's leafed out, it's really nice.
Yeah, we have no intention of getting rid of the tree. We are keeping the tree. We went around the tree. It cost a lot. I mean, we could have done a lot more with that patio had we not,
Yeah.
we tried to get rid of the tree. So the tree stays.
Yeah.
I have no idea about the usable life of trees.
Yeah.
So if you guys would like to pay for a certified arborist to tell us that the tree has less usable life, we'd be happy to entertain that. But I mean, I'm not sure. I mean, a lightning strike could hit the tree. So at this point, I mean, I'm happy to preserve the tree and commit to preserve the tree. If for whatever reason the tree dies, if there's some third party that has said that Ms. Kelker is relying on to say that she thinks it's going to die because of weight, I'm happy to look at it. We don't have that information.
I don't have any issue with parking in the back. I think I agree with Tim that it's not we're friendly to walking, community, and so it's vehicular accessible more than. And I don't even know how you. I walk to this area a lot, so I come on foot, so I don't even know exactly how you would go around. I guess you have to go down the street, come down the back, or whatever. But maybe there's some improvement in the future to kind of make that a little better. But for your purposes, I think you've done what you can to make that back space, better and more usable with the stripes. So I don't have any other comments or questions.
So definitely an improvement. I mean, it's sad to see the two previous businesses, or three, I guess, close. So I drive by there every day after work. I go that route, so it's nice to see it's alive and there's people coming in and out. But yeah, a little disappointed that after the fact and you couldn't be part of the process. I am a little bit disappointed. I understand things got built, you thought you didn't need a permit, I'm over that, but here we are looking at pictures of what's already has been built, which I drive by it, I see it, we usually try to go and see the places, so you're not showing anything new for me to vote or not. So again, disappointed you didn't bring what you still have to build. Like we were talking about the railing, it would have been nice and have a good discussion to see what you're gonna build and be part of that discussion. So just like she mentioned, I am gonna suggest if you vote, you're gonna table that you cannot build the fence or whatever you're gonna wrap this around with because we wanna see it. So I'm disappointed that that was not brought today to see and vote on it. I agree with her. I'm not seeing that connection between the park and that because people pull up on an SUV and you have a road SUV. There's not much parking. I mean, we said it's 34 spaces when you need, 45? It's busy. I mean, I have tried to go to the butcher and it's just, I can never find parking.
Can I address that for a second?
Sure.
Turns out-
It's an opinion, but.
Well, I've been there 18 hours a day for the last 4 months. It's not my opinion. It's 18 hours a day. And I can tell you, interestingly, because I thought the same thing at first, and actually we asked Ed Hasty and Jimmy Woodland if they wanted to get in on this with us, and they said no because of the parking. And it turns out that everybody leaves at 5:30, just about. So when you're out there at 6 o'clock at night, it's a perfect view to the park. And the park that doesn't really close until dark at 9 o'clock at night in the middle of the summer, it's actually not a parking issue at all. That parking lot in the back is completely empty after 5 p.m. And I mean, you could throw a baseball up and down First Avenue. In fact, my eighth graders decided they were going to skateboard up and down those parking spaces on a Friday night at 6:45 one night. There is nobody out there. And so what we've seen is, and actually if you go over there right now, our patio is completely full right now as we sit here, and the inside space is completely empty. And the actual truth of the matter is, they all say it is awesome to see the patio. There are a couple second grade parents that were there a couple weeks ago. I have 5th grader and 8th grader, and they were literally sitting there until 8:30 and their kids were at the park. There's no way they could have done that if there were 6 SUVs parked there. It's not that case. And so we want to use it for what it is. So while I agree with you that there is a process, and I understand your role in that process, the reality is, seeing what happened after the fact is actually such a huge, amazing improvement over what happened before that I'm really encouraged. Like, there's such a great feedback. There's so many people that do interact with the park. I had a woman with 3 small children come over last night, no cars in the lot, and she walked straight across on the path. She's got 3 little kids. She's like, I was at the park, I need some chicken tenders, can you help me? I gave her 3 free lemonades. She sat on the outside, it's a little cold, and she enjoyed her food with her little kids. Like, that never happened before. And whether there was bushes there or not, whether there was a ramp there or not, the accessibility or access that we've provided was never the case, despite what this commission did in 2004. So I would encourage you to see that the upside really is huge. And I think we'll continue to do that. If you guys want us to come back to let you be part of the process
Yeah, I
for
mean,
the rail, that'd be great.
I understand sometimes changes are, because we're so used to seeing that patio, but my point being, it would be much more helpful for us to picture it when you're, rendering or something, so we can visualize and get over it and forget about what was there. Now we're like, ooh, this is awesome.
Yeah, I signed my name to a piece of paper with Mr. Mazzara that said that I wouldn't do a thing until today. So I'm sorry I didn't
Well,
bring
then
that.
not to do a thing, just to bring what you're gonna do.
Well, I mean, soft costs and drawings are doing something. So we were nervous that we were gonna be told we have to change the structure, we need to put a ramp in, we need to do other things. So it would have been spending a whole bunch of money on architects to try to come back to then do that again. But I'm happy to come back to talk about that specific
I
issue.
do like the idea, I have to say, I do like the idea of the railing and people sitting, facing outside.
Yeah.
The second round has that too. They
Yeah,
have that- the thing
exactly.
there, and it's,
Same kind of thing.
anytime I'm walking by, like, I just stand there on the sidewalk talking to people, having a drink and stuff.
Yeah.
So again, if I see it, we'll
Yeah,
get it a lot.
we'll get
more
there, I promise.
vibe into it. Let's see. Nothing more on the patio. So the handicap, and maybe I need Liz to explain. So I understand moving the handicap to the back because accessibility and the raise and the stuff, but is existing handicap spot still gonna be up front? Because what about the other businesses?
Yeah, there's no changes proposed.
So they
to
have that one still, this is a new one. Thank you. I see the handicap from the picture of what was striped, that it's closer to the alley than the building. And I see a little slope, and maybe it's a picture, but it seems a little bit sloped. Did anyone check the slopes in that parking that meet ADA? And I know, I mean, you can say it's grandfather, but when the parking that was there did not have handicap, so I'm not questioning, but I'm just curious if we measure that slope and making sure that it's not over 2%.
Normally, we would rely on the architects to take those measurements and provide that information on the drawings. It wasn't provided, we were taking the applicant's word for it that this is an accessible spot.
And I have other concerns, but again, it's an old building, it's an old site, it is what it is, so I don't think we can improve a lot more with the handicap. The fact that it's adding a spot, I think I'm fine with it, so.
Yeah, I mean, that was our goal. Steve is my business partner behind me, and him and I walked with our architect and measured it. I mean, so I can testify under it, but I don't think it's more than a 2% slope, and I do think it's flat.
Yeah, I think it's pretty flat, but.
So we did the path because we actually were looking at 3 or 4 different sites. Interestingly, there's actually another handicap spot over by the butcher in the back that doesn't have a path. Because at one point we thought we were going to try to use that, and it doesn't have a path, it's just there. Nobody uses it for handicap, so this is an improvement over that as well.
I guess the last thing, speaking of that, so once the person, let's say they're in a wheelchair, they get to that door, is it a automatic door? I mean, in the front is different, because usually you have the maitre d' or someone that can see, and then they will open the door for that person, but back here, this is like a hall, if I remember.
It is. We have accessible hardware on the door, but it doesn't open by itself.
Okay. I just, that could be another, something to consider.
Yeah, I mean, we can look into it, I have no
Still
idea.
have someone just sitting there, yeah, how they're gonna get in.
Yeah. We didn't change the door at all. So it's the original door. So we didn't look at what that would take or what, like, I don't know if you have to replace the whole door system because that's a really old door. So, I mean, we can look at it, but I'm not prepared to talk about committing to an auto open and close mechanism right now.
I mean, an intercom, just they push and someone can come and open the door. I don't know, I just think that that's something that should be addressed too.
Okay.
I don't have any more comments. Do you think of anything else? Your motion?
If I could just make one comment. To make sure I understand it, one of your partners is the owner of the strip mall.
He is not.
Is that the J and SDJ?
Jeff Wagenbrenner does not own that strip.
Okay, okay.
Is that what you're insinuating?
That's what I was led to believe.
He does not.
Okay, all right, because I just wanted to kind of clarify the point about, getting permissions to try to make the improvements, the physical improvements that are necessary, as well as the softening, and you talked about some limitations to softening on the sides, but not necessarily to the front. But, if he is somebody that you can talk to about getting those things done, or if
Yeah,
it's related to the land board.
He is related. I don't know. I mean, I'm happy to talk to them. We had to spend our own money to do the striping. So I know that there'll be a monetary component there. And so, and I know that monetary component isn't well received necessarily. And so, because it's not mine, I can't commit to it. I'm happy to have that conversation and see if I can figure out screening. But it's their parking lot, and there are a number of different people that are partners in that deal that rely on that income. And so they're very well aware of what it brings in. They've had a bunch of dark spaces in there for a while, so I don't know what their resources are. But if I can try to bridge that gap and figure out how to spend some money, I will.
Well, and it seems to me, just given the fact that the other two end spaces, the former commercial spaces, are about to be occupied, it's gonna create more load on the dumpster and the use of that parking lot for.
Different space, different site, different dumpsters.
They have a different dumpster, okay. I knew they were different ownerships, but I didn't know about the parking.
Yeah, it's
lots.
weird. They're like, there's this much space in between them, and they're totally different sites. Like,
Just to be clear before someone makes a motion, so 3 variances is what the parking spots, the number of parking spots, smaller size of the stalls, and they're extending the patio into the front, towards the front. Those are the 3 variances.
Those are what I identified in the code, yeah.
Okay, and then if we want to add a condition about the screening or the fencing or
Yeah, I think we should see what that fencing is like. Yeah, I agree. Draw that up in here. Yeah.
Okay, so can I have a motion? Motion?
Are you gonna make them as 3 separate motions, or?
I think I can vote on one, but if any of you feel like there's one of the variances you're not,
Right.
sorry, we can make it to one.
Make it into one.
Yeah, with a condition, but maybe list all the
Sure.
variances.
Yep.
I have 1, 2, 3.
Okay, all right, motion to approve with, the variance for less, I just said less parking spots, the smaller parking stalls, and the variance to extend
The patio.
the patio,
To the front.
to the front. Correct?
Mhm.
Okay, and then, we would like to see the fence, like the fence detail, how you're gonna do that, what it's gonna look like, where it's gonna be placed within that pad, and how how it's gonna, interface with the piers, and any softening you might be able to do. Okay.
That maybe?
Yes.
so this, just from a procedural standpoint, this case will be over, and I would apply again for the fence, or we would approve this partially
With a
and
condition.
then table the fence.
You could probably do either, either approve with a condition with staff to work with the applicant on those topics that are of interest to you, or you could approve what all the things that you have seen and ask the applicant to come back for the vertical components.
Yeah, I think that's what we were asking with a condition, that we're, well, if we vote yes to approve it, it says with the condition that you have to come back for approval of specifically of the
Got it.
fencing or grade.
So once the condition is lifted, that's when the approval takes effect. So you'd have to bring back the railing or
Detail
fencing detail and the screening diagrams and so forth. And once that's met, then all the approvals on the 3 variances are met.
Just a recommendation, it might be easier to reword the motion for the 3 variances you listed, with condition that fence details, piers, and softening details come back to the plan here. Like, you could change my wording, I'm just,
No,
But-
Just write what you said.
Yeah, what you just said, and read it again. Just read it again. The condition that the fence details and the softening come back to the planning commission before.
okay, yes, that would.
A second.
Commissioner Wark,
Yes.
Commissioner Ronzerno,
Yes.
Commissioner Kaskisuo.
Yes.
Okay, that's it.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good night.
Dimitri, can you just give her a chance to?
I'm gonna fold it. Oh,
Why don't you take a screenshot?
oh yeah, I was gonna fold it up, you can have it.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I fell asleep. Can you wake him up?
Wait a minute.
So can we continue to have this occupancy?
Yeah, this is condition.
That's what I was talking about.
Does that work?
Yeah, that's what, thank you, I appreciate it. No problem.
All right, moving on, PC case number 7-2023, 1111 and 1113 West First Avenue. Matt Marshall, the applicant. Go ahead and come forward.
How are you guys?
Good, thank you.
So I divided my buildings. I had the restaurant my dad started, and
Could you state your name?
Matt Marshall, sorry. We had ADA on the restaurant side, which is 1105. That's actually where the sign's at. And we just wanted to put ADA on the back, put a handicap spot in the back and mark it. Yes, or the patio in the front, you can access ADA, but you can't come through the building just where the water meter and that kind of stuff is for the door. The restaurant side, that's all ADA already. You can come through the front and back. But when I divided the buildings, I just need to have ADA compliant. So we just restriped. We never had stripes. I mean, we had some stripes at one point, but I don't know if they were ever right. And that's all I'm asking for. Pretty simple.
All right, thanks. Liz?
Yeah, this one is simple. I appreciate you coming in. You know, it's similar to the last case, the site slopes, the doors are, of course, the floor is level, but the site is sloping, so it creates some ADA challenges, which came into being in this case because the site got, or the interior got subdivided. So, the parking, even though it looks continuous in the front, is actually partly dedicated to this building, partly dedicated to the prior case building. So both of the cases, just to double check for you, that front parking was subdivided between the two businesses, just taking, what was on the parcel for the two buildings, rather. So in this case, the parking in the rear is even more constrained in terms of what you can do. Historically, the applicant has utilized that lot as stacked parking, and proposing continuing that. A little bit of a change with the ADA spot, because you can't really stack that, or you'll create one that's not accessible. It sort of voids the point. So in some sense, there's a reduction of one spot, but the spots are organized now. And in terms of the count, similarly, again, we're trying to fit as many spots in there as we can, or as they can. So the size of the spots is a little bit smaller than required by code, 8 wide, 8 feet wide by 18 deep versus 9 feet and 19 feet deep. But we're gaining ADA spot, there's a path to the rear door, it creates an accessible opportunity for folks. And actually, in this case, the accessible spot that's out front, you can take the sidewalk and come through the patio from the front. So both spaces will be accessible, both from the front, both from pedestrians and people arriving by car. The required, in terms of the amount of square footage that this building has would be 22 spots, 17 are provided. And this is really just kind of documenting a historical condition that was never varied, so creating that variance record. We don't have any issue, we appreciate everything you've done and recommend approval.
Thanks, Liz. Francis, any questions or comments?
So what exactly are we voting on here?
Parking size and count and arrangement variance.
So you could
Because
say like
they're
as
stacked,
submitted.
they're too small, and there's too few of them. What's that?
You could say as submitted.
You can say as submitted, yeah.
Simple.
Sarah?
The approval language would make a decent motion.
Just, yeah, I think everything's pretty clear, except for, I'm curious how the stack spaces worked historically, and if you have like staff parked there, if they're all customer.
My whole life, yeah, it was, down the whole strip, we've never had issues.
Right.
It was staff, customers, there was plenty of times, like, you were parked there, I'd block you in. It's just, it is what it is, it's Grandview.
So there's no plan to like change how it operates, I guess?
No, it's up, if I was still there running a business, it wouldn't matter if you parked there. It's just like I always said next door to the coffee shop or whoever, if all of you parked in front of my spot and then went to the coffee shop, it is what it is. Eventually, you're probably gonna be part of my customers too. I just never cared about going, hey, this is assigned parking for my spot. We all, it's just kind of been like wagon rental, we've all just shared the whole time. So 90% of the time, it's it's employees in the back, and yes, there's customers too. I'm not really changing, I'm just adding another,
I'm curious too, mostly just because I have a similar lot like this, and we have staff parking in front and then customers.
Yeah, don't get me wrong, I dealt with it all the time in staff, like, it would be double parking and they'd park at the street, and I'd be like, you guys gotta pull forward. To me, it's common sense, but we're asking a lot, I think.
Yes, no comments.
Got any comments? Councilman Panzer?
No, not specific to this entry. This is it's a very unique space within the city, and I think that, as illustrated in the previous case, there's a need to allow for kind of a wider accommodation for various uses, and nobody's real fond of the phrase "it is what it is," but it is what it is. And I don't think anybody really desires, from my perspective and from what I've heard, and been here as long as you've been, no, it's not something that we want to change. It's a little piece of that specific community, but certainly a piece of the whole city. So I would encourage our commission and future commissions to treat it with a wider scope of optional use and a wider use of variance applications.
Life in the city, right?
Yeah, go to Short North if you really want to see real problems.
Mayor?
motion to approve of the restriping plan for the rear parking lot to create a new accessible parking space, including variances related to the parking count, space size, and arrangement as shown in the plan as submitted.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Majerno,
Yes.
Commissioner Cascucci,
Yes.
Commissioner Wolf,
Yes?
and Chairman Gentry.
Yes.
Approved.
Thanks, Mr. Marshall.
Thank you for your time, guys.
Yep.
Have a good night.
Man.
I don't want to take credit, but I'm going to. It seemed to go up quickly. All right, PC case number 8-2023, 1685 West First Avenue, the Granby Heights Public Library. Looking at a major site plan review. So who will be speaking, please step up and state your name, please.
Good evening. I'm Tim Hawk. I'm the architect representing the library. I'm with WSA Studio, and I'm also a resident. I've lived here for a long 28 years, I think.
I'm Carmine Russo, the landscape architect on the project with Realm Collaborative. Haven't lived here as long as Tim, only about 2 years, but happy to be a resident.
You'll live here for 28. So we have a few words to help. There's a significantly detailed submittal I'm sure you've had time to go through. I think we'd all agree that the library is one of our crown jewel pieces of community in the community. And next year, in 2024, the library will celebrate its 100th anniversary in June. Coming through the pandemic, on the other side here, the library sees an opportunity for us to build for the future. And one of the significant things that changed during the pandemic is the way that the customers in the community interface with the library system. So I'm sure you've seen they have a temporary truck in place for drive-through book pickup. And they originally had a book drop, now they have a book pickup. That's been really popular, so there's an interest in making that be more permanent. Additionally, the Music on the Lawn series, which is well received by the community, is entering its 37th season. And it draws quite a few people. However, there's some growing concern about safety related to that program. If you've been to the program, based upon the small patch of lawn that supports that area, they have typically taken Oakland Avenue and shut it down, but let's face it, people just sort of almost flood out on First Avenue. So this project's proposed to help, I guess, reinforce and create a greater sense of place with a sense of safety for the library and create a better sense of connectivity to the community. So what we're doing is expanding the lawn on the east side of the property, and we're doing that by erasing some existing parking area and allowing the lawn to expand. Additionally, the area that is used for the concert is a temporary structure that has to be taken down each year, and there's lots of maintenance with that. So they're interested in putting in a permanent structure that can be used for that concert series, but I anticipate also for many other types of community events that the library supports. So there's a pavilion in the plans on the east side of the building as well. To accommodate the drive-through for the...
The drawings are recognized as well, if you'd like.
Sure, thank you.
To listen.
So for the book pickup, to accommodate that, the drive right now has two-way entry into the site, both from, the signage encourages one-way entry, but there is two-way entry into the site. So the plans that you see reconfigure the parking lot to prioritize one-way drive coming from the west through the site to the east. Additionally, there is a walk that runs along the north of the parking lot that is I think it was intended to meet compliance and accessibility issues, but there are these pilasters on the building that come out and create, they restrict the depth of that parking area. And so the plan is to reconfigure the parking lot to expand that walk, making the accessibility run along the north of the parking lot to help collect the people for all of those activities. And then there's a lot of other very detailed changes
Yeah.
that we can answer. Would you like to add anything, Carmine?
No, I mean, the only thing I would reinforce, and they're in the diagrams there, but we've tried to improve ADA accessibility, we've tried to improve vehicular circulation, we've tried to make a safe drive and drop off for the permanent location for the book, drop off, doubled the size of the park, which I think on a regular day is just gonna be a nice park just to be in, but then also it is going to be better to accommodate the events that the library holds. So we've tried to basically just improve everything, you know, from a safety perspective and the perspective of the use.
Okay, thank you. Liz?
Yeah. First of all, I want to say, what a fantastic packet, thank you. Makes my job easy when all the information is there. So the applicant, you know, has presented the case well. I think there's a few issues that we'll bring up. With a parking lot, similar to the last case, it's just drawing attention to the fact that there are existing trees already existing there. Trees are required, trees are remaining, so they meet that requirement. Utilities, storm system wise, there was a letter from the civil engineer that indicated that the amount of earth being disturbed, the area being disturbed is less than an acre. And it's becoming more permeable, so not an issue for stormwater management per se. There's a couple other considerations in the packet actually, and that we discussed when the library came in. There's several parcels that make up the site that the library sits on, which is the same similar situation that the now K-412 campus for the schools had as well, just these legacy parcels. And so we discussed combining the parcels to kind of represent the entirety of the site for the library as part of this process. The new structures, at least one of them, spans the various lots, so it's just much easier to be able to apply a standard being a single zoning category. We had discussed RS2, but after I started doing the staff report and looking at the zoning plan, I contacted the library director earlier today as well. Her recommending C1, which is the same commercial zoning classification as the majority of the commercial parcels on the east side of Grandview Avenue. So it's a less intensive commercial zoning category for where there's side yard abutting residences. So we would recommend lot consolidation as well as rezoning to a consistent C1 zoning classification. And the commission is empowered to decide the sizes of lots as long as they're consistent with the uses. So you're just looking for a recommendation on the rezoning, which will have to go to council, and lot consolidation will need to get filed as well. Let's see, regarding major site plan considerations, there's a number of considerations that were copied into the staff report from both the community plan, the spaces and places plan, and the design guidelines, all of which really stand behind and support all the changes that are being proposed today. An interest in having abundant green space, having and supporting civic amenities, specifically supporting the role that the library plays in the life of the community and the events that it hosts. Ensuring safe traffic flow, which the changes to the parking lot will assist with. Let's see, preserving pedestrian-friendly character, having an outside walk-up opportunity to the new box, as well as opportunities for pedestrian and gathering things on the site. All of these things are very much in keeping with the guidelines. Let's see, really kind of covering it, pretty much the stage, the permitted stage that's being proposed, the materiality of that is white metal essentially, is picked up in other aspects of the existing building that has some white trim, so that is also consistent with the design guidelines. Some of the materials are a little bit unique as compared to things that are listed in the design guidelines directly, and I'm speaking of the board formed concrete is not necessarily noted, but it's a craftsman kind of treatment of concrete, so in that way it is synergistic with the design guidelines. There is one issue with signage that I'll bring up. The sign, the replacement sign is being located where the existing sign is, which is in the front yard. I don't know if it was ever varied. Signage isn't allowed in front yards by our signage code, so again, this is kind of housekeeping to acknowledge that it's okay to remain where it is in the front yard of the existing lot. The parking, a little bit more specifics, the parking number is being reduced. It's already less than would be required by a code calculation. However, when the applicant came in, we asked them to do a count, which they did for a week, and there's information in the packet about that that would indicate that they've got enough for the kind of run-of-the-mill weeks that they get with a reduced number. And there's lots and lots of on-street parking to use for special events. There's the sizes of the spaces are compliant, so the number is a variance, and also there's a minor variance for the setbacks of the parking against Ashland and Oakland. Additional screening has been added in both of those locations to ameliorate the impact of that, and it's only 2 feet, so it's 8 feet back instead of 10 feet back. But that makes up an extra couple spaces, so felt like that was worthwhile. Nearly everything that we need to review, or that you all need to review for major site plan, has been submitted with the exception of lighting and final stormwater plans or terminations. The lighting that may want to change as a result of configuration changes would need to come back for approval, or you could defer to staff for review of that as long as it meets the statements within the guidelines for how lighting should be done. Which is specifically that it be, particular foot candle, consistent, indirect, shielded from glare, all those kinds of things. Coming down to the end, in terms of lot consolidation and rezoning, city certainly recommends approval of that and recommendation of those changes to city council, and approval on the major site plan as submitted, including placement of the ground sign as a variance for its placement in the front yard, and contingent on a final lighting plan that is compliant with the design guidelines being submitted, the final engineered stormwater plan being acceptable to city engineer, final landscaping, signage, other construction drawings generally in keeping with what's shown in the packet being submitted to the Director of Building and Zoning. We would recommend approval as submitted.
Okay. Thank you, Lisa. Tim?
I'll let someone else get it first.
Sarah?
Well, I love the library. This is a great, addition to celebrate their 100th birthday. My question was about on page 25. I really appreciate the packet and the images and all the detail. Page 25, there's I guess it's where maybe the food truck, like a food truck corral or something there. But I'm assuming that's going to be a curb. Like, it doesn't look like a curb cut on the rendering, but like, is that like a drive in there? How are they going to get there?
I believe that as we get into the detail, they're gonna probably put like a mountable curb there. So
Okay.
essentially it would be a curb, but like you could basically drive up onto it.
Yeah.
Because if there weren't food trucks there, it could just be a little
Yeah,
plaza
so I'm worried.
space with tables and chairs.
One of those I think they can pull up
Sure,
the cars.
sure,
So some
sure.
way to like control that, but allow the food trucks or whatever
Mhm.
to be there when. And I'm assuming the library might, like you said, might even use it for other events or whatever. Okay. Yeah, I didn't know if that was just a factor of the rendering or whatever.
Yeah.
No, that's right.
I had the same thoughts. Sorry if I could.
Yeah.
Just, how does that work from a city standpoint? The difference between a mountable curb and a curb cut and,
You can have them reviewed by the service department and the city engineer. And, you know, if there wants to be, a physical barrier, that exists there, all the rest of the time, you don't need to bring a food truck up, something can be worked out with the Department of Service and the city.
Thanks, Sarah. I had the same
Yeah.
thoughts as one person.
And then the material for this would just be concrete or some sort of paver?
More like a paper grade concrete, but with like maybe a better finish to it.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it helps, and no changes to the existing, like, I know they already took out or maybe modified some parking there for that drive for the temporary boat pickup, but like, the rest of the parking that's there is not being altered on that one-way.
It's being adjusted, so it's going from 90-degree to 60-degree angled, to reinforce
reinforce the
the
one-way,
fact that
yeah,
it's a
yeah.
one-way traffic, yes.
Yeah, but you're not getting any more spaces out of it when you do that,
No.
okay.
The area where the drop-off is reconfigured though, Sarah?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, that, on the
Yeah,
east side.
but
is
nothing
reconfigured.
else on the rest of the side of the
Right,
angle is.
inside the angle,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. I don't think I have any other question. I mean, it's a good project, it's gonna improve the library and appreciate the thoughtfulness of, you know, the thought that went into it. That's all I have.
Sarah?
Some of the questions were already answered, Sarah had to. More of a comment or suggestion about the proposed, sign. It, maybe, my suggestion, and again, I'm not, it's not a deal breaker, but maybe relocating it to the other corner. The way I'm thinking is two things, so wayfinding, you want people to enter from Ashland. So I think someone that might not be familiar with Granby, they're still new, they're coming from First, they see the sign there, it's like, oh, this is where I need to turn, and that's not where they enter. Or even if they're coming from the other one, they miss Ashland and they see the sign here. I think maybe putting the sign closer to where people should be turning to get into the parking as a wayfinding, for me, that makes more sense. The other reason I'm thinking, you know, I've been to the Music on the Lawn, and this is all covered with people. It just seems like it could block someone, like someone cannot put a chair there now because there's a sign there, you know. Again, it's not a huge sign or anything, but it's just, I think it will open it a little bit more and provide more space for people to just gather and put more chairs. And again, it's just a suggestion to consider. It's not a move it, like, it's fine where it is, but I think it could be probably better on the other corner. That's all I have.
Yeah, so,
If you're ready.
yeah, so thank you for the great packet, really appreciate that. A couple of things, just maybe more housekeeping as well, is when did that mobile unit come? And like, was that like approved, or that's a temporary thing we're trying to make permanent? Just kind of need to like globally understand that.
It came in the middle of the pandemic when the library had to shut down, but they wanted to be able to offer books to people.
Sure.
And it's remained because of customer interest.
So I guess that's where my comment comes in, is it's changed the traffic pattern of the city. I would argue, a lot of people use this library that don't live within the city. So what we've created is a loop, and we're reinforcing a loop of traffic. So have there been any traffic studies, for example, that tell us what we've done to Ashland, what we've done to Oakland, what we've done to AmeriCorps, Pearl? So I think, and maybe the library can answer for us, but I think maybe 80% of people who use the library don't actually live in Granby. And so we're introducing vehicles. And so then I take this new change in traffic, this permanent encouragement of the vehicle in a walkable community. I think that has significant impact. So,
Commissioner, just to provide clarification,
Yeah.
the temporary structure was approved by a building permit.
okay.
And it did expire, but the building the building department allowed an extension on it for another year. So it did go through the, at least the administrative part of properly applying for a building permit, and being reviewed at that time.
I'm less worried about that piece, and I'm more worried about the change of operations and how it impacts our city. And so I guess it would be helpful to understand the dynamics of people using the library, because I can tell they use it. I experience that they use it. This is the way it is used. It's the question of whether we should encourage that or not, if there are other ways to do that. And since we're asking for a reduction in parking, we're asking for more throughput of these books and the use of that. I think it's my job to kind of bring those to light in this form.
Just as a, and certainly Director McDowell, but just a couple notes on that. In terms of a traffic study, you could do one, but there'd be no baseline,
Yeah, okay.
right? So that it's been in place for a while. The other thing just to make note of is that one of the things many of you may know the parking lot is used for now is as a way for traffic for people who are dropping their kids off at school to align with Oakland north of First Avenue, because there's no left turn onto Oakland off of First coming from the west. So folks turn south on what am I saying? Yes, on Ashland, through the lot, and so they can be directly headed north at the intersection there. That all happens before the library's open, and the library is gracious enough to permit it. Just as a couple notes with regard to traffic and how traffic has.
Well, it works great in the emergency situation, I guess. And I'll let you speak, because like I do have a furtheration, it's kind of a leading comment for me, but I'd like to hear you.
I think I know most of you, so I'm Ryan McDonald, the director. Just to clarify, the traffic pattern isn't changing at all. It's the way it's always been. The moving to the angled parking is just to discourage the people who violate it. There are people who currently come in the wrong way, knowingly that they can sneak in. So the traffic pattern isn't changing at all, and is lined up the way it's always been for a considerable period of time. Just as a point of clarification. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I understand.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, I live very close to this.
Yeah.
That's why I kind of.
Yeah, we definitely don't want to change that pattern, because people are really familiar with it, and particularly people who are dropping off kids now are really familiar with that kind of
So
stuff.
one of the things I see this as an opportunity to do, and I don't know if it extends outside of this project, but maybe it's a question for the city, is traffic calming along Ashland and Oakland, particularly if we are going to approve a stage that may spill out when it's closed. Like what amenity or permanent thing can we do to kind of solve an issue I see that our city has? It's kind of the point of it. And then my follow-up question for the design team here is, we're reducing some of this parking. I get that it's kind of hard to get into. We're changing the location of the stage. It appears to be centering it on the building. Is that the design intent? It is facing the parking lot that the library owns. Is the thought that there will be eventual like an expansion or accommodation of these crowds from there, so that that's how the park is used? Or would it be, did you consider it a different direction? Just want to
We considered a broad, so we actually did a comprehensive long-range master plan to consider all of those areas. And we looked at the use of the area east of the library for different crowd sizes.
Okay.
So we looked at it from the standpoint of almost like a scatter diagram of seating just on the lawn, the expanded lawn. Then we looked as if we were to take over Oakland and even expand into the lot. The reality of it is, I wrote some of the statistics down, that currently the lawn supports around 600 occupants for a concert. And with this reconfiguration, the library would be able to accommodate almost as up to 2,000 potentially on the lot without spilling into the street. So we felt, they felt actually, that a doubling of the capacity was sufficient, and we did not need to plan to take over Oakland or the parking. And the reason that's important is I think we want to preserve the parking that is to the east of Oakland, so that there is some parking during the concerts there, right? So we don't want to use that for the concert.
To reinforce Tim's point too, on page 7, we did a couple of diagrams that show, I think you have it open in the movie, but what can be accommodated with the new expanded footprint of the park. The other thing I would add as it relates to the circulation, I know that a lot of people actually stand at that book drop-off right now, like as pedestrians, and sometimes there's cars driving through and there's gatherings of people, so that was one of the ideas with the OOP box, is that it's two-sided so that the pedestrian walk-up window is actually facing the park and that the vehicular side is towards the parking. So we tried to separate
I
that.
like that improvement, because I do know people sometimes even park in that other lot, walk across the street. And I
Right.
think that is a.
And if I can add as well, that we're trying to bring definition to the east side of the site. So what we've done there is we've introduced a walk path and a series of benches to bring more solid edge to that edge of the site, to increase the safety and less likelihood for people to sort of go out onto the street.
Artificial barriers.
It's sort of, yeah,
Soft
well, it's a physical
Yeah,
barrier.
no, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yes, you can see in some of the renderings, we've shown some like evergreen hedged out, edges to try to really create that defined edge.
And that would be continuing the final plans, submissions, and we just
Yeah.
want to see that. And then, just so I know, for the traffic that's coming in, it doesn't look like there's a lot of stacking. I don't know if there's ever a lot of stacking there. You could get by it in the drive aisle, right?
yes.
Okay. That was one of my concerns, particularly more for the school drop-off.
It's actually planned for 2 vehicles to be there stacked in the area that's the pull-off. So there'd be one individual at the drop or pickup with another stacked behind them. And then you, of course, have others that would be potentially stacked in the lot.
So you could, I guess my question is, if you're in the drive aisle, someone, like if there's, say, 5 cars waiting,
Yes.
you could pass it.
Yes,
Absolutely.
yes.
Okay, that was.
And actually angling the parking allows that to be more successful.
Those were kind of the big things. It was more, we have an opportunity to evaluate how the library is being successful now, how it could impact our community on this. I don't know if anyone else has any question. I think you have one.
Yeah, and Tim, I think I understand what you're saying, and I think it's something worth discussing even more from the city standpoint, and even from the applicant standpoint. I mean, the library's always existed as you either walk there, you drive there, you park, you get out, you go in, get whatever service you need, get back in your car and leave. Now it's almost making it more of a vehicular, I shouldn't say focus, but it's enabling vehicle interaction much more than it used to.
Yeah, it was my feeling and experience.
Yeah,
So-
yeah. Well, I mean, I pick up a lot more myself and drive through as well. So I think, this is an opportunity for the city even to look at that general area and say, is there a way to, do we need to think about ways to manage this moving forward? Not to say that, because we're now making it a permanent fixture, or we're a permanent change to the library, encouraging it to be just as accessible by vehicle as it is by foot.
Just a couple of responses to that. Yeah, that's a good point. I think that's well taken. Right now, the school construction project is mucking up the traffic there around Oakland. We will soon have kind of a steady state there when that's done at the end of the summer, and so the next school year, we have opportunity to get a baseline as to what that's going to look like, particularly in Oakland. Also, I think we are looking towards an area plan that will extend all the way down there, in the near-ish future. So really take Granby Avenue all around, all the way over to the library and the commercial district. So those will be opportunities to do those things.
Yeah, and that's all I'm saying as well, is I think it's great that the library is innovated in a way that I think extends their services to people, a lot more people, a lot more easily. So I think as a city, we just need to evolve with the library, is the way I would look at that. And I love the shipping container usage. I think it's really cool. The pull-off, so stacking and that turning radius, I mean, is that something, not like a traffic engineer, so, I mean, that's,
Tight.
yeah, that,
You know that, this is seven,
yeah, yeah,
It looks
yeah.
tight on the, where they're gonna pull out, like, just do the auto turn?
Yeah, we ran the turn on it. I mean, I think,
Did you?
you know, when we do our final engineering, we'll make sure we'll double check that. We also note here that there's some green space on either side of it too, so like if there's a need to like adjust that or modify it slightly, we have space to do that.
Yeah.
I don't want them driving up in the grass to.
No, I don't either. I don't want to.
Those teenagers.
Yeah.
What sheet is this?
That's 6.
If you look on sheet 6, you can see the actual cars are depicted on the diagram.
And just going back to Sarah's point about I love getting the food trucks off the street, just increases the safety for everyone, opens more parking for days of special events. I don't know if there is a way to clearly show that this is not a driveway, in a tasteful way, not a.
I think
Don't
we had
not put a
discussed
gate up or anything like that.
maybe developing bollards in there that would be
That are
removable. And we
Yeah.
just didn't depict them. That would be something we'd have our civil engineer help us with.
Yeah, or a flower box, I don't know, something that's easy to get out of the way.
Yeah,
with.
something that,
I have a comment that's very relevant to that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thanks for being here. These look like great improvements and certainly good vision to plan on future use and potential future expansion of programs for the park, the park section on the east. Had it been considered to actually keep the hardscape that controls, that handles traffic, the parking lot, and allow the current green space that is to the south of the food trucks, just flip that and make the green space to the north, therefore adding to the additional lawn space, and then have a hardscape where the food trucks can operate off of that are just past the drop-off point.
You know, I don't know that we consider that because we were trying to keep those uses separated. So you're saying more integrate these two.
It's a relatively rare use in terms of the food trucks being there, so
Yeah.
I feel like, and you've got a lot more experience than
well,
I.
I would say that from a design standpoint, I think what we're trying to do is create activity zones. So the green space that abuts the parking lot creates a more distinct separation between the drive aisle and the activities that are occurring on the thing. So if you were to move that down, I think we'd be blurring the distinction between those areas.
You're in favor of more green space when it gets to play?
Well, I mean, I'm not necessarily in favor, this is
Yeah,
strictly
it's just
conversational.
discussing,
yeah.
But it just occurs to me that you're dealing with challenges about how to have this transition, whether it's a transition curb, sorry, what's the name of it? Thank you, mountable curb,
Yeah, sure.
bollards, additional infrastructure in one form or another, where due to the limited use of that space for food trucks, 4 hours a week for 12 weekends?
Well, if I can.
I mean,
I
yeah,
can-
yeah,
I think
I
I
think
jump in.
I-
A couple things to keep in mind. We're trying to also kind of create a barrier there for pedestrians not to come into the parking lot from that area.
I feel like you could still obtain that
Yeah.
with the hedging or whatever,
Yeah.
that still would now be at the south of that space of green instead of at the north.
Also keep in mind that that corridor space there is primarily also designed so that we have ADA access for our bands and performers. And there's the ramp off the back so that they can kind of pull in there without obstructing the current traffic for the drops.
That's a different use, and so
Yeah.
thank you, that was
And
illustrated.
the other thing that's not been spoken is I mentioned it briefly at the beginning of our presentation. We anticipate there will be other types of uses the library will bring. So imagine that hardscape there being used for a summer children's program where they're not sitting in a muddy field,
Yep.
but they have tables set up there for activities
Perfect. Thank
or
you.
a
Yeah.
or whatever.
It was not
No,
a.
it's
I actually
it's
think
strictly conversational first.
maybe the best way I could describe it too is that where number 4 is sitting, and maybe like it's because the food trucks are sitting there, but it's really a flexible plaza area. Like
Yeah.
Tim's saying, it could be used for a number of things.
And it's used to support the uses, the activities and the programs of the pavilion itself.
Right.
From a
And that's how people would siphon through and get
Okay.
to the back of the boat drop off.
Well, then just figure out what kind of curb you're
Yeah,
gonna.
right, yeah.
We're also, like, when COSI comes and the zoo truck comes and
Yeah.
things like that, we can pull up.
Yeah.
Also, they may have mentioned it, I really like that there's gonna be power there for the food trucks, which will eliminate them using generators, which is
Yeah.
always, nobody likes to listen or smell to the
Yeah,
generators,
no
so
sense.
kind of a
And,
nice.
and then finally, if I may, just one more. I understand that the traffic pattern has always been instructive to be one direction. I also understand that I've used it, not used it like everybody else. But have you considered a gated egress that gives simple instruction on the Ashland side, entrance through Elmwood? I'm sorry.
Something in addition to the signs, some of the.
Fairview
Yeah.
side that instructs to Ashland.
Ashland,
Oakland, not good.
Oakland
So-
side.
No,
Yeah,
you're okay.
instructs-
Those trees, it's hard.
Like
It's a long
it's okay,
day.
I know exactly what
Something
you
that
mean.
basically tells you to go.
I'm still in work clothes. No, I just
Yeah.
as an additional, nothing that suggests that it's gated, but just
Yeah.
to reflect that it's one direction and gives at the same time potential wayfinding for,
To go around.
yeah. Just a thought.
Yeah, no, that's really good suggestion.
Well, I like the plaza area, I think we can figure out a way to show that it's not an entrance, so that's, I got faith in that. I'm very excited about this, I think it's gonna be great, I think it really enhances the library. The only other thing I would say that is sort of related to this, you mentioned the lighting plan, future lighting plan. So is all the lighting gonna be replaced, like, in the entire library area?
As
Or
far as
parking lot?
exterior, a significant amount of it, we've just moved over to LED already, but I'm sure there'll be specific landscaping lighting that we'll need to come back to regarding it. But we're not looking at adding a significant amount of lighting from what we currently already have.
Yeah, because it seems, I walk by there at night, it seems like the light spills over onto neighbors, I don't know if there's a way to focus it down.
We're star friendly, kind of
Yeah.
down lighting.
I think it probably will be more like low lighting for walk paths that we would add, associated with the plaza, not
I was-
highlights.
Well, I was saying adjusting the highlights. that
Oh, I
are
see.
there now to focus more on the light, just, I didn't receive any specific complaints from neighbors, I just walked by there and it seems like it lights up a lot of the houses.
Mr. Gentry, if I might address that, those lights are on timers. They turn off at 9:30 at night and they come back on in the morning, when our earliest staff people arrive at 7 a.m.
Okay.
And then they turn off again, they're all on timers.
I don't walk by that late, I guess.
You have young children.
Well, then we're all good. No, I got nothing else to say, I think it's great. Councilman
I
Panzeri?
had one more
Tim?
thing real quick, and it's more administrative, so the consolidation of the districts and lots. R2 allows for library use right already, so what is the impetus to make it C1 versus R2? Because this is, my background is, library's always been there, people bought their houses, they're adjacent to it, they knew the library was there. C1, God forbid the library ever goes away, what are we preventing? And so I'm all for consolidating, I want to know the impetus behind that.
Yeah, the area plan, and spaces and places plan, which is what I went back and looked at between the time we met, and I was thinking RS2 also. But those two documents, support that whole strip along First Avenue being part of the non-residential uses of the city. So it's just synergistic with the community plan and the spaces and places plan to provide for more commercial, institutional types of uses there rather than residential, particularly if it's a single parcel. The type of proposal wouldn't necessarily be RS2 is single family zoning. So if it was residential, it doesn't really make sense to put one house on this now very large parcel. But to redevelop it as this very small, much smaller format, neighborhood adjacent, sensitive C1 could make sense if the library weren't there, which will never happen. So
They're already rebuilding the space.
I know, but we're changing the zoning in essence. And based on my recollection of the spaces and places plan, it basically makes that recommendation to about Ashland and then it stops, is that correct?
Mhm.
Okay, so
Yep.
this is like the terminus of
Yep,
Yeah.
that's correct.
that potential modification. More comment and understanding on my end.
All right, so I got Councilman Panzeri,
Nothing further, thank you, thank you.
Mayor Burns.
I really want to commend you for hitting the right notes in terms of the civic use and anticipating really making the most of the space. We've identified this as a civic and educational hub. You really, I think, no doubt it's because you hire local architects and landscape architects who understand what goes on there and how to really do that. So I think we're fortunate to have all three institutions coming before the Planning Commission this year with really exciting projects and really the pavilion, particularly in the stage. My staff, there's a partnership and I really can't overstate that thing takes a day to assemble and disassemble. So this is going to be we'll capture staff time on both ends with this. So really want to thank you for the attention to detail and really trying to make the most of what we've got here.
All right, thank you. Are there any questions or comments from the audience members?
I guess my comment is about the food trucks and visibility. I'm sorry.
State your name. address.
Colin Todd, 1178 Oakland Avenue. So I live basically across the street and down a house or two. And the food trucks and visibility of the music on the lawn, if those are not parked here as opposed to on First, where they block nobody's view. Now they're more, could possibly be blocking people's view.
Okay, thank you.
Specific to when something's going on, like an event.
Music on the lawn, yeah, yeah.
Concert.
Mhm.
Good news is they can pull through the ones.
Yeah. Okay. All right, thank you. Does anybody want to try and tackle this? How do you want to?
Take it to motion, to the lot, and then send it to the site. We'll do the lot. Motion to approve the lot consolidation and rezoning to C1.
To recommend.
Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Wood,
Yes.
Commissioner Bongiorno,
Yes.
Commissioner Gaskowski,
Yes.
Chairman Gentry.
Yes. So we have left the site plan approval with basically the contingencies of all of the administrative reviews and approvals. Is that?
Yeah, so I'm trying to structure the recommendations so they could be used as a motion if they're on these more complicated cases. So I might read through that. You can edit, add to, take away from, it's a place to start.
Okay, I'll try. Okay, motion to approve, major site plan for PC 08203, as submitted, with a variance for the placement of the ground sign in the front yard. It's contingent on submission of final lighting plan, for staff approval, staff approval.
It's all, is it
It's
all?
all in the guidance, right, like,
It's what you prefer.
What I think she's asking is all of these administrative staff approvals that still have to be addressed, or is that what?
yeah, I guess we can list them, but, and say staff approval.
We'll want to see a final, so we want to see a final lighting plan,
Mhm.
and if it's compliant with the design guidelines, then if you're comfortable with staff reviewing that, we can do that. If you'd rather have it come back, you could do that.
Or if variance is required.
Yeah. Okay, staff approval unless variance is required, then we'll come back to planning commission. There's a final stormwater management plan that's acceptable to the city engineer. And final landscape signage and overall construction drawings, generally keeping with the design intent indicated in the packet as submitted, and to be verified by staff as part of the building permit process. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Kaspersky?
Yes.
Commissioner Bonjoro?
Yes.
Commissioner Rourke?
Yes.
Chairman Gentry?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
All right.
How you doing?